Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to Ann Arbor Community Bookfest. We're so happy you're here. We're so happy that Sonali is here. She's going to be in conversation with Bookfest board member and author Ann. And I'm going to let them do the introductions and all that, but I just wanted to do a few logistical things. Sonali is going to be available for signing after the event, and her books are for sale, several of them out front via local bookstore Book Suite, and so if you'd like to stick around for that, we would love to have you do that. And there's also going to be time for Q&A at the end of the conversation, and I'll be walking around with a microphone, so if you have a question, feel free to just wave your hand, and I'll bring you the microphone, and you can ask. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to these two fabulous folks.
Thank you so much, and welcome. Thank you all for getting up early on a Sunday morning and coming down to the downtown branch of the library to listen to us. I am so thrilled that this is the first event of the newly renamed Bookfest. So now we're called the A2 Community Bookfest, and it's a change from Carytown Bookfest because, first of all, we're not in Carytown anymore. But second of all, it's really about community, and it's not just Ann Arbor, it's the Ann Arbor community. So it includes Saline, Ypsilanti, Chelsea, other places like that. So if you go upstairs to the vendors, and I hope you do, we have vendors from all over the Ann Arbor community area. So please support them. So I'm super excited. So I just joined the Bookfest board this past year, and we were brainstorming. We need some headliners. We need people who are so popular that they'll get butts in seats, here at the Bookfest. And so we were brainstorming names, and I said, well, I'm recently reading all these Sonali Dev books, and I am just a Sonali Dev super fan. And I know she lives not that far from here in Chicago. Maybe she'd consider coming and speaking here. And somebody said, and she has an Ann Arbor connection. And I was like, what? So I reached out to Sonali, and she so kindly and generously said yes. So she's going to have a book that's coming out in 2 weeks, and we are lucky enough to be able to buy the book 16 days early. So before anybody else on the planet, you get to buy the book. So I just want to encourage you to go out there, support Book Suite, and buy the book. So let me just do the introduction of Sonali. I'm thrilled to be in conversation with USA Today best-selling author Sonali Dev. Her hilarious and heartwarming novels have been named Best Books of the Year by Library Journal, NPR, The Washington Post, and Kirkus. And for those of you who don't know, in the book world, we call Kirkus Cranky Kirkus, because Kirkus hates everything. So the fact that they named her one of the best books is amazing. She won the American Library Association's award for Best in Genre, the RT Reviewer Choice Award, multiple RT Seals of Excellence, and has been a RITA finalist, that's for the romance books, and has been listed for the Dublin Literary Award. Sonali lives outside of Chicago with her husband, 2 visiting adult children, and the world's most perfect dog, which I have to disagree with because I have the world's most perfect dog.
Come now. No.
So please give Sonali a warm Ann Arbor welcome. So like I said, I was stunned and excited to hear that Sonali has an Ann Arbor connection. So why don't we get started with that? Tell us a little bit about your connection to Ann Arbor.
First, I have a really soft voice unless I'm yelling at my kids, so I hope everyone can hear me. And second, this is going to be a little bit like a wedding speech where I thank people because, at Indian weddings, we're always like, and I have to thank my sister-in-law who came all the way from India for this. And my husband's sister is actually really all the way here from India just for this. No, she's visiting family, but she landed yesterday, and so she's still jet-lagged and she's here, so it's great. The Ann Arbor connection, when I migrated to this country 27 years ago, this was my first home, and this is the found family that we created here, and they're here. So, and we met in a visa line in Mumbai, a city of 21 million people back then officially, and we were standing one person apart. And Praveen here asked me where I was going to, and I said, you won't know, it's this tiny little town in Michigan. And he said, really, try me. I said, you really won't know it. I don't even really know how to say the word. And he was like, really? And it was Ypsilanti, and we lived less than a mile away. And we met the day, we were both just recently married, and we haven't been apart, I think, emotionally for 27 years now. So that's, so I lived here about 12 years, and then we moved to Naperville, and we've been there about 15 years.
And both of your children were born here,
Both
right?
my children were born here. My nephew, who came to us when he was 17, my sister-in-law's son, he has lived in Novi, in Northville, Buncombe, Novi or Northville, one of those, for many years now. So it's definitely home.
So I was reading your website, which is so charming. And one of the things you wrote about is that you wrote a play about mistaken identities when you were just 8 years old, but not becoming a novelist until the advent of your first gray hair. And I don't see any gray hair, so I don't know about that statement. So can you talk about your journey from an aspiring playwright in Mumbai to a USA Today bestselling author here in the United States?
My gosh, that's an entire hour's conversation right there. But it's really, I actually do these. I teach writing, and one of the workshops, one of the first things I make students do is write down the first story they ever wrote. And it's such a great, place to find why you write. And it's funny that this play that I wrote when I was 8 years old, so I grew up in Mumbai, and we had this little community, cluster of buildings, like a colony is what we called it, which is kind of weird, ironic name for it. But and so we would put up this 5-6 day long, there was a big stage built, and it was this complete coming together, and everybody got to perform. And even 8-year-olds who thought they were playwrights got to get their motley crew of friends together and perform. And so I have always, as long as I remember, liked to write. I was a military brat. We moved around a lot. And so, I was also branded the chatterbox as a child, which has not changed. But I realized very early in life that that is not a compliment when you're a girl, because my male cousins were never called chatterboxes for talking. So I like to talk. My opinion was something I thought the world would be richer for. Also, what has not changed. But and a journal, or a diary, as we called it back then, is always there. It never calls you a chatterbox. It tells you to shut up. And so I think it was always needing to express every thought that popped in my mind where I started writing, and then I have always written. As you know, Anne has a book out and is a wonderful writer too. And as you know, publishing is a whole different thing from writing. And that, of course, was a nice long journey, first within myself, believing that this could happen is its own journey, then writing something that people might want to read in a world where you're a 1% minority, and publishing was a whole different space 10 years ago. It was not what it is today. There was no hashtag diversity in publishing going on. And so we've come a long way, and we'll talk more about that. But I think my first book came out 2014, and I sold it in 2013, so it's actually been exactly a decade this year. Wow. And man, we've come a long way, baby. Yeah, and I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. One of my board members, Jamie Samland, met Sonali last night, and he said he was listening to A Bollywood Affair, which was her first book. And Sonali kind of blushed, and she's like, oh my gosh, that was my first book. That was my first book, baby. And I know how it is. Like, your first book, baby, you're just so new and fresh. And it's almost a little bit embarrassing, because it's like reading your high school journals or something. It's it feels a little bit like fresh. But yeah,
I did go back and read it recently, and it's not that. One of the things people love to ask you when you're a writer is, if you would go back and change your books, and if you ever read your books. I do actually read. I'm one of the very few authors where I will, especially when I'm feeling kind of, what am I doing when the writing life gets hard, I will go back and read my own books, and and it's kind of surprising. I'm like, okay, this is, I should keep doing this. So I'm also a very modest person. So Bollywood Affair, given that it was, given that it was 2013, given that the romance genre was just starting to come out of the, become this. It's always been a female empowerment genre, but it was coming into this century in terms of the heroes we were writing, in terms of the heroine's journey, all of that. Given that, it could have been very ghastly because it had a child bride as a heroine, and so there was great scope for regressive, things. And when I read it, I think back in 2013. It is not a regressive book, and I feel very proud. Now, there are a few stupid things I did where, she had a waist he could span with his hands, which was all this tropiness from, and those are things, if I could, little things I could go back and change. But I think, it's not as cringy as, yes.
No, I think
you have to read it as a romance novel, as a rom-com, and it's a classic rom-com, and I'm, still pretty proud of it.
And so that your debut book led to a series, the Bollywood series, and then and then you had another series, a 4-book series called the Rajesh series, and that was my gateway drug to Sonali Dev, was the Rajesh series.
Good gateway drug.
It's so good. And
Again, modest.
For those of you who don't know, it is a modern Indian retelling of Jane Austen's books. So Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, and Persuasion. They're out of order, but anyway, those 4 books, which are frankly the best books. The ones she left on the side probably aren't worth doing a retelling. So tell me, what was have you always been a Jane Austen fan? What was your inspiration to move from the Bollywood series to the Rajesh series?
So it was always. I was introduced to Austen, amazingly enough, through a retelling. And I read her in middle school. And the way that I found my way to her, because there was a Hindi language television show, a TV serial, as we called them, back in I think it was 83 or 86. I was probably in like 6th grade. And this was back when television was 3 evenings for 2 hours a week, not 7,000 channels and 20,000 streamers. And so when something was out on TV, it was this big deal and everyone was talking about it. And that was my introduction. It was called Trishna. It was a scene-by-scene, line-by-line retelling, but in Hindi/Urdu. And a real-life prince was Mr. Darcy. So before Darcy Mania hit the West, Darcy Mania hit Bombay quite hard with Rahul Dhanrajgir, I will tell you. But that was and I think for me, the thing that really hit was there wasn't a whole lot of storytelling going on in the books that I was reading where women desired things and got them. Usually if women desired things, they ended up in padded rooms.
I believe that sounds like a fantasy where women want something and they get them.
And they got them. And so I think that the magic of Austen is that more than 200 years ago, she dared to write characters who had enough self-worth to want things and then wait for them. So to put this in perspective, Pride and Prejudice. In Pride and Prejudice, here is a woman whose choice is between destitution and marriage. And she meets the man who, by some calculations, is the 8th richest man in England, right? Which is, given England at the time, the 8th richest man in the world. And he falls for her, and every interaction she's had with him shows him to be a jerk, for lack of a better word. And she says, no, I deserve better, when her choice is between destitution and, and marriage. And I think that level of self-worth, and her answer at the end is not destitution. It is that man changing to not be a jerk anymore, and changing, and he's a good guy. It's just his lens of empathy is missing because he comes from so much privilege. So that idea that as a woman, I could have opinions, I could express them. I didn't have to care about what the aunties in society said, and that everything I was being told by the world I lived in is not absolute. And, because Jane Austen makes pokes fun at the world she lives in while still living in it. And I think I blame Jane Austen for the woman I became. and so when I have a fight with my husband, I'm like, take it up with Jane, it's she's to blame for this. And so very deeply, so from that age onward, I think I ran to the library, checked out all her books, read it, and I was like, wow, like, what is this thing? And I think in my mind, I was doing the retellings already, right? I mean, I was writing, those were the aunties in my world, and there was already the hottest guy in school was Darcy, and all of that was already happening. So I always knew that I was going to do that. And then as I started writing seriously and taking my own, storytelling and need to tell story and themes and all of that more seriously, I started to realize that I didn't want to just translate that into a different culture. That's been done often, it's been done well. I wanted to write homages to the lessons I learned from her books. So definitive things that happened for me in my life from reading those books, that was what I wanted to pay homage to. So my series, and these are my 4 favorite Austen novels. As I said, the other 2, arguably, she is Austen. So as in India, we touch our ears when we talk about the great masters and all of that. But my 4 favorite were these, and in my head they were always part of the same universe. And so I wanted to put them under the umbrella of one story universe. And the story universe here is is a politically ambitious Indian American family who is the Rajes. They are descended from royalty in India, and their oldest son is running for governor. So the series kicks off with his gubernatorial candidacy being announced, and it ends with the election. So that's the general umbrella under which these 4 stories are told. And then they are Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, which is a gender flip. She is the Mr. Darcy. And I think for me, they're an exploration of privilege in immigrant communities. That's the most overreaching theme. And then, of course, there are homages to each one of my favorite Austen novels.
So, when you were writing the Bollywood series, I've read some interviews with you online saying that the publishing industry really wasn't ready for a person of color to be writing a romance, or an Indian American woman to be writing a romance, and they gave you feedback like, you're never going to be able to sell these, it's a very niche audience, that kind of thing. Then when you moved on to the Rajes series, did you feel that the publishing industry had changed in that time, or was it the same, BS all over again?
I mean, the BS does not disappear overnight, right? But we have gone from being, I think, the shelves being 99% white to the shelves being, 82% white. And that's pretty close, and given that it's been a decade, that's a change. Mm-hmm. Given the demographics of America, that's not enough, right? And so things have changed. What has changed, what is so lovely about the world, and there's much to be said about cancel culture and all of that, social media, but I think the thing to be said about it is the shame we have been able to cast upon people to get them to change, right? Which is such an interesting thing, because when I went out with this book to sell it, hey Dia, it's my niece, the thing that, it was perfectly acceptable for an editor to sit in a pitch session, look you square in the eye, and say, can you change one of those 2 protagonists to white? Mm-hmm. Today, that editor would lose their job if they did that. And no editor would do it that openly. They're still thinking many of those things, and they might find elegant ways to say it. But that's a pretty big change in the world. Or for people, to say, there was a lot of dolphin clicking where we were told, that it just won't sell was a weapon that was used across the board, not just in publishing, in all media, in sports, in everything, right? Who's going to watch that? Movies. And I think that the fact that social media gave everybody a microphone to go out and call that behavior out has made the change. And then, of course, sales is a very interesting weapon because it works and it doesn't work, right? There are many reasons why books that are not white neutral don't sell or didn't sell. And the journey to now them being bestsellers has been a journey where extra money had to be put in for that inertia to be destroyed, right? To pull people out of their 200 years of training. It's true of everything, and it is true of this too. And now we've come to a place where on a daily basis, agents and editors will reach out and say, are you looking to move publishers, or can you recommend, and the people are continuously asking for the next big brown story, which is its own, whole conversation. But yes, there has been a change, and we got to see a lot of very interesting things back then.
Well, as an author, when you're trying to sell your book, one of the things you do is you talk about comps or comparators. And so it's like, oh, it's Big Little Lies meets Orange is the New Black. Those were my comparators for my book. And it's so exciting now because when you have somebody like Sonali, you can say it's Lies in Other Love Languages meets something else. And so, when you're a known commodity, you become the comp for other people, and you blaze the trail for other authors behind you. So speaking of exciting things, so this was the next book after the Rajay series, right? Called The Vibrant Years, and it came out in 2021?
December last year. Yeah.
Okay. 2022? 22.
December.
Oh my God.
Oh wait, no, 2022 December. Oh my gosh, I'm like.
Yeah, I know.
I am ahead of my times.
And it was the first book out of Mindy Kaling's special imprint called Mindy's Book Studio. And so Mindy Kaling, as you know, is a comedic actress, and very famous for her role in The Office. And she used her brand and her power to start her own imprint and took submissions. And the first one that was announced out of the box was Sonali's book, The Vibrant Years. And what I love about, I'll let you describe it, but what I love about it is that it's an older woman who has a sex drive. So
whoever could have believed
who would have
it?
thought so, right? So
isn't that supposed to die at 40?
Exactly. So do you want to describe the book for the audience who hasn't read it?
Yes, it is. It's the easiest way to describe it is it's 3 generations of Indian American women on the dating scene at the same time. So it is a 65-year-old hot grandma who has just moved into a retirement community in Naples, Florida.
So we've all heard of MILFs. So is this like GILF?
GILF, yes. That's kind of the word my daughter once used for my mom, and I was like, I'm not comfortable with that. So she is. I do not like that term, but she is most certainly the GILF of all GILFs. So she's just moved into this retirement community, and she's the new hottie in town, and all those things. And then her daughter-in-law is recently divorced from her son. So Allie is a 45-year-old, woman who's trying to break into broadcasting in Florida as a brown woman trying to, sound familiar. So Ali is the most autobiographical, I think, character I've ever written, and we can talk about that some more. But she's kind of uptight. She's really trying to do all the things which is the special curse and blessing of women my generation, where you're trying to be everything for everyone, and you were told as a child that you could be anyone and do anything, and then you weren't told that didn't mean you could stop doing the things your mothers and grandmothers did in terms of taking care of the home and the family. And so we are the exhausted generation of women. I think the answer when I ask any of my friends how they are really is tired. but so Ali is very much a person of that generation, and then and Kali, who is the 20-something granddaughter, is a tech genius who has coded, and an app when she was in high school that was this that helps people manage their anxiety, and now she's expected to do something new, and her venture capitalists want her to follow this idea where it's a dating app, and she has never dated. And so what better way to research dating apps than to pull in your grandma and your mom? And so there's these 3 women testing dating apps and basically coming into themselves, I think.
Well, this is interesting. So you say that the Allie character. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Is it
Allie, yeah,
Allie
Alicia,
character is the one that's very close, most autobiographical to you?
Almost embarrassingly so.
Oh, that's so interesting, because I mean, I've read the book. I love the book, but I do not consider, like, I mean, she is uptight and very like straight-laced.
Yeah.
And I've met you, obviously,
no,
just
I'm
not very long.
Yeah.
So
People often wish I were a little bit more uptight, but yeah. I'm aspiring to be uptight.
So how did that? I mean, so that was your 8th book. Right?
My 9th book.
Your 9th book. Oh, sorry. Overachiever. So how did it take to the 9th book for your personality to really come through in a character? Like, what inspired you to put it all out there with the 9th book?
Okay, so I'm going to go back and explain that a little bit more, because there is a little bit, there's of course us in all our books. There is that. But when I say that it's the experience. So here's the thing. You go to any kind of book signing or author talk, or any film stars and actors and artists, and one of the things you will always hear people say is, oh my gosh, I must thank my extremely supportive spouse. And I mean, the reality of it is that really, like, your spouse is happily eating pizza and okay with you being emotionally unavailable while you make your art all the time, really. And so the truth is that being married to an artist, to a creative, involves being married to someone who will often emotionally disconnect from you, is doing something where your income is going to drop drastically when they give up their day job and try to do this thing where there is no guarantee of an income or success. It is an incredibly hard thing to do when it is not your dream, and you simply are expected to make those sacrifices for someone else's dream. This is a hard thing to do. And when there are hard things to do, we as humans don't always do them very elegantly, and there is conflict, and there is struggle, and there's all those things. But in my books, and when I'm here, I'm like, oh my gosh, my husband is so very supportive. He is. But there is struggle beneath that support. And, through 10 years of this, our marriage has survived. And on days, I think that's a miracle. And, on days, I'm so incredibly proud of it. But what I'm saying is this is a complicated thing. It is not as simple as my husband and my kids ate pizza happily every day for the 3 months that I wasn't showering and getting up from my, desk. So that is the piece, I think, for Allie. A woman having, and this is completely different, I think, when a man has a dream and a woman has a dream. That's the world we live in. That is the many-splendored patriarchy. It's just one of those things. And it's changing, but it is true. The very cute story of Stephen King, writing, throwing away his manuscript and his wife pulling it out of the garbage and sending it. Those are things that happen more to men than women, at least up until now. And I think so Allie's story is that. It is her having a dream, wanting that dream, sacrificing her family's, economic needs for that dream, and him having a hard time with it, and then them digging into whether it really is about just those things or it is about more. It is about men themselves and how they feel about their dreams, and the pressures of being a breadwinner that takes that away from them, and then watching your wife be able to do it, and how easy it is to say, oh, it's just easy for you girls because you don't think you're responsible for the family, or whatever. Like, all of those complications is Allie and Ashish's story, and I will tell a TMI story, which is that my husband's name is Manoj, And originally, the Ashish character's name started with an M. And one of my beta readers, when we were discussing the book after, kept calling him Manoj. And I was like, oh, oops. And there are some of our fights. And I mean, initially it was much more us. And then as you do the revisions, I gave over and Ali became Ali. Ali was no longer me as much. But initially, I was like, okay, then I'm going to have to find a name which is as far away from an M as I can. And so he is now Ash. He's Ashish. But it was almost to that point where I was like, oh, oops, okay.
That's so funny. So my son is in the back row over there, and he's read my book. Oh, everybody's going to look at him now. And he read my book, and I said, how did you like it? And he was like, it was very weird. There's all of our family stories all over the page. All of our family inside jokes are there on the page. And yeah, you can't help it as an author to pepper your stories with, actual little inside jokes, actual little words that you use, and then also the emotions and the relationships and the tensions. I mean,
you're tapping
layered.
into what's inside you, and there is what's inside you is what's inside you, and it is your family's life. But you like the story. My son was a freshman in high school when Bollywood Bride came out, which is my second book that has two pretty distinct pretty elaborate sex scenes, and his girlfriend group in the cafeteria read one of them out loud, which I think is really funny now, but he was traumatized. He did not think it was funny. He has never read one of my books and swore never to and never will. And so I think for my kids and nieces and nephews, and I know Dia has said this, it's like reading your books so the first question they ask me is there sex in this? And then I have to, so my daughter actually removed a sex scene and gave her my book to read when she was 14. These books do not. I'm talking about my romances. And so I removed the scene and gave it to her. And many years later, she told me, Mom, there was other stuff that was sexual in the book other than the scene, right? So I was like, oops, too late.
Yeah, I used to work at a big corporation, and people would find out that I had a book. And they came up to me, and these older men would come up to me, and they'd say, oh, I'm going to buy your book, and I can't wait to read it. And these were like my clients. These are people I had meetings with, and it has a couple of sex scenes in it. I sort of cringed. Like, I don't really want you reading my book. Like, I know it's good to have a sale, but I'm not sure. You might think of me differently.
I'm completely comfortable with it. Please, they're good. They might do good things for you, and your spouse might, thank me.
So, before we go to the main event, which is Lies and Other Love Languages, not available in stores for another 16 days, but available outside. I just want to do a little bit of fangirling. So when The Vibrant Years came out, it was splashed all over media and social media because of Mindy Kaling's prominence. So do you have a highlight in terms of that launch week of things that happened?
Oh my gosh, it was the, just the best experience ever. It obviously, I'd like to take credit for it, but the credit was all Mindy. But there was this one day. So I was in New York for release day, and Mindy flew in at 5 in.the.morning from LA and did The View, then Good Morning America, and the Drew Barrymore show, which was... I cannot imagine a better release day than that, apart from, if I'm J.K. Rowling and people are standing in line for 2 nights. But it was really amazing. I think getting to meet Mindy and Drew Barrymore on one day, because they are such absolute opposite badass women, and being in the same room with them and kind of just watching what can be, what one can become when one has opportunities and talent. It was amazing. It was also one of the kindest sets I have ever been on. I have a theory that every person that Drew Barrymore employs on that show is tested for empathy and kindness. Because literally there's this buzz going on, right? They shoot three shows in a day. And everybody's doing stuff. And anyone on the staff, if you have a question and you ask them a question, they stop what they're doing, make eye contact, and talk to you. And I'm like, wow, there's a talent that seems to be. And after I came back, of course, everyone I talked to, I held both their hands, looked in their eyes, and talked to them like Drew Barrymore. And then everybody was like, enough of that, stop it. And so then I stopped it. But that was the funny thing. She holds both your hands, looks you straight in the eye, and talks to you. And it is lovely and discomforting. And I'm like, Drew Barrymore is looking in my eyes. So I was like, what? I wrote a book? Keep.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I think I follow you on social media, and probably for me, the highlight was seeing your book projected in Times Square at like, I don't know, 10 floors, like huge picture. And she's standing in Times Square and she looks up and she's like, there's my book. I mean, I just felt so excited for you just watching that picture.
And my editor and my publicist walked me. So we had this whole day of stuff going on, and she's like, we have a surprise for you. And I swear I had no idea, right? And so they just start taking me for a walk. I'm like, what? Have they bought me a car? Like, what is, which I will say might have been a little bit better than the Times Square hoarding. But I was like, what? Where are we going? And then we came and kind of stood under this billboard, and then I kind of knew, and but as we're walking, like, why are we walking in New York City? Like, what could it be? And it was this. It's the most incredible feeling to see it up there. It is.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think this is hashtag goals for sure.
Yes. For me too, yes.
All right, so now I've made people wait for so long, but now let's talk about your current book, Lies in Other Love Languages. Do you want to do sort of like a quick elevator pitch first and then maybe read from it?
Sure. And then do we have time for Q&A? Because I think people...
I think we'll leave about 15 minutes for Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the quick elevator pitch, which I am terrible at, which is why it takes me 300 pages to say anything meaningful, it's a story of a best friend. It's female friendships, right? So it is. It's the story of these girls who were soul sisters since they were 12, growing up in LA, and 27 years ago, they got into a surrogacy arrangement that was botched, and they broke up their friendship. And now, 27 years later, the child has a genetic test, and she joined some program to study something, and she has her DNA. Analyzed and realizes that her parents are not her parents. And so there's kind of an unraveling going back into what happened 27 years ago.
Okay. Do you have a passage that you'd like to read so that we can whet the audience's appetite for it?
Of course I left Naperville without a book. And so then when Anne emailed me saying, would you like to read? I was like, I don't have a copy of my book. So this is unpracticed. I think I'll just read the opener.
Okay.
So I have no idea where I'll stop. So this might go on for a while. Okay.
I'll stop you if we get bored.
Someone snored really loudly in the... Speaking of snoring, Praveen, should I embarrass you? No, I won't. I have two of my dearest friends in the audience who are also world champion snorers. Like they could, if there were a medal. So let me know if it gets boring. All right. Lies in Other Love Languages by Sonali Dev. Vandi Guru's rules for life. 1. Identify what you want. 2. Take action to get it. 3. Embrace the consequences. Chapter 1. Vandi. Saturday, 2 p.m. Ever since her daughter was born 27 years ago, Vandi Guru's greatest fear had been losing her. As she read her brother's text, the full impact of that terror hit her in one fell swoop. Any idea why Malika didn't show up for dance practice today? Pinky is livid. Vandi had built a thriving career as an advice columnist on helping people transcend their fears. How many times had she explained how worry stifled the joy of relationships and crushed your chance at happiness? And yet, reading those words made Vandy forget every wise and equanimous word she'd ever fed to her millions of readers around the world. Her heart raced as she dialed Malika's number. Scenarios of doom flooded her mind. A white van into which a serial killer had shoved her child. A lone hungry shark making its way into the crowded waters of one of LA's beaches where Malika loved to swim and seeking her strong dancer's legs from among hundreds of others. A stray bullet, an undetected aneurysm, a scaffolding dropping on her as she walked along the pavement, animatedly talking on her phone, which she always answered when her mother called, except she hadn't since yesterday. Vandy left her daughter a voicemail in her calmest tone. "Trying to reach you. Call when you get this. Love you." Malika hadn't shown up at the airport last evening to pick up Vandy as promised. The last time they talked was yesterday afternoon before Vandy boarded the flight to come home from the last stop on her speaking tour. Vandy had told herself that Malika had probably just forgotten. She'd simply texted to say she was taking a cab home and was looking forward to catching up soon. Malika had been far too busy recently. Since Veer's death, she'd thrown herself into her work with heartbreaking desperation. Vandy had done the same thing. The mix of distraction and exhaustion was a potent drug for numbing grief. Vandy got it. Even though her daughter had recently accused her of not understanding, she got it. This couldn't possibly have anything to do with that argument she'd had with Malika 2 days ago, could it? It had completely blindsided Vandy. Unlike Vandy and her own mother, Malika and she rarely disagreed. They'd certainly never before said the kind of hurtful things they had that day. But when they talked after the argument, Malika seemed to have moved on from it. Before Vandy's mind could hurtle into examining every word they'd said, Sonia, her assistant, stuck her head into the green room. 10 minutes to stage time. Sonia's voice pulled Vandy out of the spiraling whirlpool of her thoughts. She couldn't go on stage feeling this way. The only way to stop the spiral was to stop resisting it. Dropping the fight is stopping the fight. It was one of Vandy's most popular memes. One that had been set to hundreds of sunset and sunrise pictures on social media. There was some 1,700 videos set to Vandy's voice explaining how to drop the fight. She nodded to Sonia and turned back to her phone as her assistant left the room with a soft click of the door. Vandy's finger hovered over the screen. "Where are you, Mika?" She had to calm herself. Closing her eyes, she embraced the sensation of not knowing where Malika was. Her heart rate spiked, but then it slowed, because walking through the fear was the key part. The resistance was what gave the imagination oxygen and made it impossible to focus on a solution. Only when you dropped the resistance could you focus on the truth, on the facts, and figure out what was going on. Malika was not answering her phone. Malika and she had argued. Malika had missed 2 commitments. Every one of those things was completely out of character for her daughter. Vandy opened her eyes, let out a shaky breath, and scrolled through Malika's text messages. A reluctant smile escaped her when she found the video Malika had sent just a couple of days ago. Her 2 aunts, Vandy's twin brothers' wives, in a dance-off. Malika and Vandy had exchanged some laugh-until-you-cry emojis. One of the things Malika was so busy with was those absurd weddings. Vandy could not wait for them to be over, but they were 2 months away, which in Mehta family time was going to feel equivalent to 20 years. The incessant and petty competitions between Vandy's 2 sisters-in-law, Pinky and Tinku, were just something the rest of them navigated, like landmines in the family's landscape. But now that it was a matter of their sons' weddings, the gloves had come off in unprecedented ways. Every fashion designer and jeweler in the greater LA area had been engaged. The most impossible to book venues and wedding planners had been nabbed. Why were her nephews not eloping? because they were neither that brave nor that stupid. No one went up against Pinky and Tinku. Malika certainly didn't mess with their dance practice schedules. Where was she?
Right. Woo! Oh, wow. Okay. So stay tuned to find out more. So by this count, is it you've written 10 books now?
This is my 10th one. This is my 10th novel. And
10
my
books in 10
12th.
years?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, in more years, because before I sold, I had written 2, so yeah.
Oh, I sold. Yeah. Okay. So 10 books in 10 years. What's next for you? I mean, obviously you have to now go on the road and promote this book. First of all, is there anything exciting on the promotion tour for that? And then what are you working on next?
So I have, I have a panel in Naperville with 3 of my favorite authors at Anderson's. We will be doing, stuff online. It's all on sonalidev.com. but yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. But my 11th book has already been written, the first draft, which is always really... first drafts are the hardest part for me, so it feels like that's done. So I'm expecting edits back anytime from that. And that's the story of a woman finding a ring in New York City while she's on her engagement moon and getting obsessed with finding the owners. And then, of course, unraveling her life and digging up all sorts of fun stuff.
Sounds like another great book. All right. So maybe we should open it up to questions. So if you have a question, this is being live streamed and it's also being recorded for YouTube. So please wait until you get the microphone so that people can hear your questions. So don't be shy. Raise your hand.
Thank you both. That was so lovely. And I wanted to ask, this is such a hard question. Of your 10 babies, do you have a favorite baby?
Next. that is the one question. No. I mean that with absolute honesty. It's impossible for me. They're all... It's such a cheesy thing to say, but they are a piece of me. I pick books based on, what I need to process in that moment in time. So there's a very good reason for me to tell the stories when I tell them. Often, like I said, with a lot of my marriages in the vibrant years, and through the process of writing it, my marriage went from being in an X place to being in a Y place. So I have often been able to get through real life stuff through the books. So each one of them is like my deep, intense therapy for myself. They're still fun books because my mind is a fun place, so don't be afraid. But yeah, it is kind of, it's impossible for me to say. Often you're most immersed in the one you are currently writing, and so the newest one, but yeah, I couldn't tell you. But thanks for the question that I did not answer. Also, thanks everyone for being here at 10:30.
Hi, I'd love to ask about the role of setting in your work. So we're in the Midwest here. I'm a Midwesterner. You're a Midwesterner. How do you choose where to set your books, especially if they're outside of the region where we've lived? And are you ever going to return to the Midwest in your work?
Yes, actually, as I said, the one that the New York Ring one, which has the most adorable working title, but I don't want to jinx it by telling you, so you'll have to wait, is set in Naperville. And it is actually, speaking of my children. So Naperville has a very large Indian population. It's a town of 165,000 people, and it has almost 30 or 40,000 South Asians. And so there is a very vibrant, quote unquote, brown town. And I actually go there. I actually use that word on the paper. And there is, it's set in brown town, and everything that comes with that, in terms of parental expectations and societal gossip and like all of the things. And so definitely I think my settings do come from somewhere within the story. Like the Rajes are set in Northern California for a reason, because as I said, they are an exploration of privilege, right? So I actually, especially when I started writing Pride and Prejudice, that's what Darcy's character is, because Darcy had every single privilege of his time. And so I actually made a list of all the things that gives us a leg up. And, and then I wanted to see if I could write a woman who had that level of privilege and, never had to apologize for it, but just had to acknowledge it and develop a lens of empathy. But the important thing was, again, Mr. Darcy is a character that, is a jerk on paper, obviously, when we first meet him, and yet we all need bibs because of the drooling, right? Like, he is definitively one of the greatest romantic heroes of our time. And yet, every time you write a female protagonist, the first thing that you are expected to check is likability, right? Likability. Agents, editors, everybody's like, I don't know if she's likable enough, right? And it's not. And so in 2017, I wanted to see if I could write a woman like Darcy, who was arrogant and owned her privilege, and was noble and all the other things, but had that journey, and and was intensely unlikable at the start of the book, and I think that, so I made a list of privilege, and the two things she was not going to have was she was going to be brown and she was going to be a woman, so she didn't have those two pieces. But other than that, she has generational wealth, she has generational nobility, she has a genius level brain, she's a neurosurgeon at Stanford, all of those things. She has a loving family, all of that. And we have a lot of family in Northern California, and those are, so my nieces and nephews from Northern California have grown up not being the only brown kids in their classrooms. In fact, being, when they celebrate Diwali and all those things, it is a norm, right? So they are the norm in their world, whereas our kids here were not. And that too is a privilege. And so, so that was the reason that I picked that, because I needed them to not have that level of disconnection and disassociation with their surroundings. So there's always a reason that comes from the story that picks the place.
So last night when Jamie, our friend, talked about your first book, Bollywood Bride, he said there were references to the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti neighborhood as well, including a certain tower.
Phallic tower, yes.
So now I definitely need to read that one.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I know that we have events starting at 11:30, and some of you might be in a rush to go to that. So Sonali will be outside ready and willing to sign your books. And if you are in a rush to go, I would say get in line quickly. And if you have a little more leisure time and want to have a selfie and a little chat with Sonali, then maybe hang back a little bit. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
you,
you.
Sonali. Thank you, AADL.
Thanks, Anne. And can they buy your book? Is that...